Welcome to Priest, Prophet, King, a podcast created to change the culture from within. Welcome to Priest, Prophet, King, a podcast created to change the culture from within. I'm your co-host, the man on fire, John Sablan, and I'm with my two co-hosts,
Keoni
and your boy Meeks.
What's up, fellas? So let's talk real quick about this this desire that we had after we did kind of that special episode as we finished 2019 on True Faith Real Talk. Just talking about your guys' experience and the need, especially for your generation, to kind of hear the message of hope through Christ and the whole evangelization effort and kind of what needs to speak truth in today's world. So let's just kind of give our listeners out there an idea of where did Priest, Prophet, King come from?
Yeah, I think, me and Keoni had a bunch of fun coming on to True Faith Real Talk. And we were just like, we should just try another episode.
Yeah.
And then we were thinking, well, why don't we just do our own podcast? We're just going to keep making episodes. And we had already had the idea of Priest, Prophet, King about a year ago as like a brand name for just doing similar things, changing the culture from within. And so a lot of things that we talked about in the last episode, just trying to be the witnesses and the examples that we were searching for when we were in high school and college and so forth. And we thought it was a perfect opportunity with the three offices that we each called to in our baptism. And then the three of us in our different generations and our different journeys and the wisdom that we can bring forth. And so we thought it'd be a perfect idea. And, we got the little merch right here.
Yeah, so check it out. We're just so you guys know, for those of you who can't see us, I know some of you are only listening, but go ahead and check us out on the YouTube channel, World Ablaze. But we're sporting the swag, the Priest, Prophet, King swag. You'll hear us also refer to it as PPK. And just a real quick explanation. Miko, you're wearing this shirt now, but when you see it's actually the Latin letters. So PPK, those are the ancient Latin letters, which obviously we're Catholic. So that's the language of the church. So Keoni, what are we going to be talking about first in this first episode?
Today's topic is really about fostering our faith and our relationships and what that looks like. How can we go about that? And not only in our intimate relationships, but also in our friendships. We may have secular friendships and friendships that maybe faith isn't a big part of. And what we're going to be talking about today together is our perspectives and our what we have to talk about as far as, how can we grow in our faith, but still maintain those relationships.
Yeah, I think part of the thing that I know one of the major questions I get asked is, man, it's so difficult being Catholic, right? To be a Catholic Christian in today's world. And regardless of whether you're at school, whether you're at work, even sometimes in the church and in the grocery store, wherever you're at, how do I live my faith faithfully, but where it doesn't feel awkward, where it doesn't feel so lonely? And I think that's part of the reason. So we're going to start with the friendship side first, because I think, especially with your guys' peer group, that kind of becomes a difficult thing. Now, obviously, I'm married to your mama, so you're my best friend. My soulmate is your mom. So outside of mom, I don't necessarily have a need. Even though I have my brothers out there and other friends in the church, it's a little bit different for me. So let's start with and that was funny because I think the next thing that came, we got a lot of great feedback on that last episode. And I think one of the things that came to light was relationships. People wanted to understand, okay, that's cool. I'm with you. I'm listening. But what is it about relationships? So Meek, since you're the one that's kind of fresh out of high school, right? What was that experience like for you as you were trying to live out your faith in a public school setting?
I think I had always kind of let people know where I stood, and I don't think too many people were trying to influence me one way or another. And it was kind of just well known. But Miko's a Catholic. He's really into his faith. He doesn't really do too much. He's not going to go out. And I wasn't really pushed on it too much. I had a lot of good friends. Not too many Catholic friends, but my two best friends are Protestant and Assyrian Orthodox. And that was all throughout high school. I had those two. So I didn't necessarily felt like I was missing that good friendship to where you're trying to build each other and make each other grow. I think I had that. And then on the other hand, you have, just all the people you talk to in class. You have your basketball teammates, and they all understood where I was. I understood where there was. I wasn't someone who necessarily, was just trying to read scripture in the locker room or, be that guy. I think we just all kind of respected where each other were. And I think a lot of people understood that, respected that, and then would come to me if they, felt like they had questions or what, I'm struggling with this, or, dang, Miko, I need to go to church, and would kind of come to me and talk about those things because they kind of knew I was about it, and they knew our family was about it. So that's how my high school experience was. I mean, my coach had come to me to lead the team in prayer every game, and so it was kind of well known to where I don't think I was cast aside because of that or anything like that.
How was it well known though? Could you?
Well, I think I had always made it a priority. So whether it be like, I got church on Sundays, I don't got to boast about it, but if someone says something, they know, well, I'm at church here, or, I'm going to praise and worship on Monday, whether it be at Army or, I had confirmation every Wednesday night. So it was a part of my life. So then when people asked, and I just told them, they just understood, okay, well, Miko does this. I was in high school, I was like, I don't really smoke or drink. I don't really do those kind of things. And they just kind of understood, and I left it there.
That's so one of the first points I think Miko brings up is a point of evangelization for us all. Is a lot of times because we feel like we're so different than the rest of the world or the rest of our peer group, somebody could ask that question, hey man, what'd you do this weekend? And maybe you went to mass or maybe you went to a conference, and because you think they don't understand, you'll just be like, nothing, we just kind of hung out. Versus saying, no, I went to a conference, or yeah, I went to this praise and worship thing last night. Oh, what really? So when people start to inquire, at least they know you're about it, right?
Yeah, and we always, as a family, had taken Lent super seriously. So a lot of people would, and it's pretty well known what Lent is, and people know the time around Lent. So then they'll come to you, hey, what do you give up for Lent? Or let's say something, I'm like, bro, I can't, I'm doing Lent. And then when people know, okay, this guy's really serious, because I'm doing no social media, which is easily, oh, Meek, where you been, bro? I haven't seen you on this and that. It's like, oh, I gave up social media for Lent. Oh, dang, that's what's up, bro. And so like just those little things where I didn't have to put, scripture on my locker or on every book or hold a Bible around school, but people just understood where I was at with certain things.
What about you, Keoni? What was your experience like in high school and even going into college?
Going to high school, so I went to a Protestant high school, a private Protestant high school where it was a lot of the faith was there. And not only that, basketball was nonstop. So I really didn't have a social life. If it wasn't studying for the AP, the AP tests, the homeworks, the exams, all that stuff, I was training, whether it be before school, after school, weightlifting, or homework. So I didn't really have a social life as far as just going out to the parties or whatever. But the group of friends I had, just like Meeks, my two best friends are of the Protestant or non-denominational faith, into their faith, have good morals. Like I mentioned in the first podcast, two young men striving for truth. And those are my closest friends. So I never really had, like Meek said, had that pressure. And like he said, they knew where I stood. And, whether it be, I'm going to youth group after mass on Sunday, or, talking to my friends about it. And, in the Bible class at my Protestant school, they all knew I was Catholic because I would ask questions and, about, what I'm learning in their Bible class, learning their Bible theology, about the Protestant faith. And I had questions. And, I would talk to my friends about it and, because they had the similar faith that I was being taught at school. So I was able to have those discussions with them. And not only that, like Meek said, I think Lent was a huge one because it's so, I think it's the most well-known in the secular culture even. So, I know a lot of people practice it to some extent, building up to Easter. So when people were asking me, kind of like what Meek's saying, why aren't you eating this dessert? Why aren't you on social media? I haven't seen you in a while, whatever that may be. It was known, that, it's Lent.
So would you guys say you had a difficult time, or it sounds like that you guys didn't have a difficult time living out the faith, people knew about it, but did that affect your relationships at all? So would you say that had an impact on how many friends you had or the type of friends you had? Because a lot of people out there are going to be like, man, it feels lonely out here trying to be Catholic, right? So if you don't have a good Catholic community, and we talked about community even in that episode on True Faith Real Talk, but can you speak to that a little bit about what was that experience like? And, as the people out there that are listening or watching, kind of offer some kind of tidbits of points of how to deal with that. How do you, because I know a lot of youth out there especially feel one of the biggest pressures you have is you'll crumble in your faith because you feel like you got to cower and bend to the culture. So everybody wants to belong, everybody wants to be loved, and because of that, you're almost willing to compromise the thing that matters the most, which is our faith. So can you guys speak to that? Did you struggle? Was it a struggle? Did it affect how many friends you had? What can we share with our listeners out there?
So I think Meeks and my temperament don't really call for a lot of friends in general to begin with.
Yeah.
So we value just a few friendships and we get very close to them. So the friends that we grew up with, whether it be from kindergarten to in high school, the friends that we got really close to, that was sufficient for us. And the friends that I had were, had the good moral foundation. We may have differed as far as deep into theology, but, we were still able to talk about deep things. We still had basic beliefs that were, on the same page with each other. I think it was after college where that kind of became a need that I've recognized in my own life. Like, man, I really wish I had, someone that I can meet up with regularly. But we kind of talked about this in the last episode, True Faith Real Talk. I still have you and I still have Meeks, so if I'm feeling like, man, I want to ask about this philosophical question, or there's something I heard in today's reading I want to talk about, I would call up Meeks and, we would talk about it and FaceTime him, even though he's in Ohio, FaceTime him and just relay my thoughts to him. And then we would just exchange thoughts for an hour and change, so it hasn't really been an issue for me. I know a lot of my friends have gone through that though, the community. And I'm lucky, going to Franciscan and having such a blessed environment and, my basketball team, being able to have those guys where I could relate with them. We had the same passion for sports, but not only that, we were striving to be good Catholic men. So I had that conversation with them. I had that friendship. A few of them are going to be in my wedding, so I have that community. It's a little different now because, I went to school in Ohio, I come back home, that relationship changes. Mm-hmm. So the contact is still there, but it's different. But I would like more community, even here. And I know a lot of Catholics out there want that community, and it's hard to find. So like you said, it reminds me of the talk with Doug Barry, the men play hokey pokey with the faith, and the women start to play
limbo.
That
was me. That was your dad's.
Yeah, that was you. Yeah, so they play limbo with the men, but I think people are doing that in general with their relationships. Like, I'll settle. Like, he's not that bad, or she's not that bad, so I'll hang out. And I think there's a true yearning for something deeper in our friendships, especially cultivating faith, what we're talking about today, that I think we need to raise awareness.
What about you, Meeks?
I think a lot of times it's a big thing, and I'd say a lot of speakers will say, watch the community that you surround yourself with. And I think to a certain extent, yeah, and to answer your question really, just about if it made it harder, not necessarily, because you're going to have your friends and they're going to have a certain role. So there's, I have the basketball team, I'm going to hang out with them during basketball. I have my people that I have a lot of classes with, we're going to talk and we're going to do homework with each other. But it's not always going to carry itself into, to after school or stuff like that. But I don't know if it necessarily made it harder, because there's most of the time when you're, at least in high school, for people who are in high school, it's not that hard because you're always around each other. So you're gonna bond, you're gonna do everything regardless. If this person's atheist, this one's Mormon, we're all just, if we're all in class, we're all just trying to do the same work. If we're all playing sports, we're all trying to do it together. So it didn't really make it that hard in high school. I'd say outside of school is when it's really tough, right? When you're kind of alone on a Saturday and you're like, I don't want to hang out with these people, they're going out. I don't want to do this because these people are over there. I think that's when it's important just to have people that are like-minded. And I don't know if it has to be of the faith. It's ideal if it is. But I think if you're struggling with that piece, find people who like to work out, and you guys push each other when you work out. And then I think the people that you find yourself like-minded with, in the sense of if we're both working out, we both push each other. 9 times out of 10, if you're working out all the time together, you're going to have a lot of more deep conversations, and you're going to find out what this person stands on and how I agree with that. And then you go closer in those relationships. So I think if you're having a hard time finding out your youth group or finding pure Catholic peers, I think you should just try to find people that are like-minded. If you guys are both in the stocks, if you're both in the clothes or whatever it is, find people that want to do the same things you do. And I think a lot of times people are always curious. People always want to look for truth. And it's not, I don't think you're generally going to have, a hostile environment that you think you're going to have just because someone's a different faith than you. I think a lot of times when you're striving towards something similar, you're going to find out that you're more like people than you think.
So you guys are speaking to kind of the basic friendships. I think it was Aristotle that talked about there's 3 basic types of friendship. And one is based on utilitarian, right? So there's a, I think Dr. Edward Shee was talking about this in one of his books, Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love, where he said that this is like the sales guy with the client, right? They have a friendship based on the fact that I sell you a certain product, you buy this product, so there's a friendship that's based on that. So it's utilitarian. It's not ideal, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And then he talked about the friendship based on pleasure. So when you talk about having somebody with either hobbies or certain similarities, so we both like working out, we both like the same music, even the basketball, right? So we both like the same sport. That can go only so far. And then he says that the third type of friendship, which is the ideal type of friendship, is the friendship based on virtue, something that's outside of yourself. So let's talk about the advice we need to give to some of the people out there that maybe have some of those toxic relationships. And we're not even talking, we haven't got into intimate relationships yet, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, even marriages, but even friends. I know whether you're single, engaged, or married, which we're all in, you're dating, obviously, having good friends around you is a big deal. I mean, that's definitely something we need to take to heart and keep in mind. So what would you guys advise the listeners out there to deal with friends that aren't really good for you? Maybe you had that friend that you've known since 3rd grade, and some people hang on to that relationship just because we've known each other for 15 years, but that friendship isn't really good. So what would you say to that, Keoni?
I mean, like that situation in particular is a tough one because you have that history. You have that, I can't, abandon that friend who's been with me through this, and this, and that's a difficult situation. But I think what it comes down to is your why. And we talked about that last episode, is what are your values and what do you stand for and why do you stand for them? And once you get to the point where, okay, I'm not about going out every day or every weekend. I'm not about getting drunk, whatever that is. Why are you not about that? And I think once you kind of develop that perspective and you embrace those ideals and you're striving for virtue, the friendships that are toxic begin to be exposed. And you start to say, okay, I can't do this, because it gets to a point where you finally have to look yourself in the mirror, look your friendships in the mirror, and there's that moment of contention where a choice has to be made. Are you going to abandon your ideals and your striving for virtue, or are you going to cave to, whatever it is that your friends are doing? Or are you going to decide to say, you know what, I need to let go of this relationship? So I think what a lot of, peers that we've seen, Meeks and I have been talking about it, are, whether it's with faith or with relationships, if you don't know why you are standing for this, and this, if you are not embracing ideals, striving for virtue, then it's going to be like, whatevs. I'll hang out with them. Like, why not? And it becomes this whole, why not? Do you? We're chilling type of mentality, to where you get sucked up, you don't even know it. And then everyone behind that you surround yourself with has this similar mentality as you. And then I think it starts to go downhill. So I think, if you're having that toxic relationship, honestly have that conversation with yourself. If that has to be in meditation, what is keeping you in that relationship? What are you holding on to? And is that a time, or is there something that you need to let go of? Is that within yourself or the relationship? So I think it's having that honest discussion of, what are my values? What am I standing for? Does this person line up with those? And it's going to be a hard decision. No one said it's going to be easy. But it's something that I think more people need to kind of step up to the plate and handle.
Yeah, if there's anything to add to what Keoni said, I think if you were to lay out whatever ideals, or say, I know you've been friends for a long time, but I don't know this is for me anymore, and they don't understand that and they're mad at that, then it's just not a real friend. Mm-hmm. So you have to just choose between your comfortable friends because it's been a long time, or someone that you actually want to grow with, and someone that's actually there for you. So I think depending on how they respond to whatever your confrontation looks like, and saying, hey, this isn't for me anymore, and I think how good of a friend they are is evident through their response. Mm-hmm. So if they come through and say, what do you mean, dude? Like we were just doing this and that and all this, and what happened to when we was bulls, we were doing this last weekend, all this stuff, and that's how they come. And as a on a defensive end, I guess, then you just know that that's someone that isn't who you thought they were, and it's just someone not to keep any longer.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I would say, just to add to that on the friendship side, is when you have friendships that are based on superficial things that are just real shallow, those are going to come and go. They're going to wither away. And I know I can say today that, really, of course, our nuclear family is important to me, and that's really where I get fed a lot, but also just even my Catholic friendships. Like every person you meet, everything you do is either going to make you better or make you worse. Is either going to bring you closer to God or bring you further away from him. And I think all of my Catholic family, I cannot see them for months, and then I can run into them at church or in the store, and it feels like no time was lost because we're rooted in Christ and we're rooted in something higher. And there's a genuine level of trust and depth because of we're both rooted in trying to be holy and trying to be saints. What about do you guys want to move on to like dating, and or do you guys have more to talk about on just friendship?
I was just gonna add, kind of going off what Meeks was saying, based on their response. So if you want to know if a friend is really about it, and you're in your heart, you've been kind of getting that call or that tug, like, this isn't for me, or I'm not sure if this is the right friendship, or I'm really struggling with going deeper, or I want to have that community, bring that up to your friends, that call or the change that you want to make or the change you're trying to make, and their response will tell you if they're a real friend or not. How they respond, if it's defensive, if it's you're fake, or you're not really about it, or what happened to this, or you used to always do this, that's not a real friend. Like the accuser, right? The devil's the accuser, and he's trying to bring you away from your goal. And your response, honestly, you're saying yes to growing in virtue, to changing, and the devil's going to accuse you. Whereas a real friend you have that discussion. A true friend's going to be like, okay, this person's still, I know who they are. They're still a good person. Let's talk about it. So kind of going off of me saying, when you have these friendships and you're trying to make changes, voice that to your friends, and their response will obviously, I think, shed light on the nature of that friendship.
Oh, great point. That's a great point. So let's move on to kind of, there's probably a lot more to say on the friendship level. And I think as we kind of hear feedback from the listeners out there, we'd be more than happy to kind of talk about the different things that are on your heart, that are on your mind, things that we can share with you, both on a personal level, but also from a theological and philosophical level. None of us claim to be theologians or philosophers, but that's definitely in our journey of seeking truth, we want to be able to be a resource for all of our listeners out there. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about intimate relationships, because what's neat about all of this is that we're all in 3 different stages of the relationship aspect as it relates to pursuing the marriage vocation, right? So obviously I'm married, Keoni's engaged, Miko is dating with discernment, right? And each of those are different levels, but in all of those cases, we all have somewhat of a similar role to play, because as men, we realize the effect and the impact that we have as men, of, either as husbands and fathers or soon to be husbands and fathers, God willing, as fathers. But let's talk about your experiences across the board of how did you approach dating? Now, for the listeners out there, I mean, my situation was much, much different. I met your mom in high school. We're high school sweethearts, but mom was a convert to the church and didn't come into it into adulthood. And I was a lapsed Catholic who really wasn't even catechized or formed in the faith and never stopped catechism at age 7. So it's unfair to say that we had the same experience as you guys did. So I don't want to use us as an example because it's probably the wrong example until we get into the point of how to live a marriage in the way that God has designed. So let's talk about how you guys both approach relationships. Meeks, we'll start with you.
I had always known that if I was to date anybody, it would be with the intention to marry them. So it was never just like, oh man, I really like them. Let's just see where this goes. It was more of like, okay, how much longer can I see in the future of us, being able to hold each other up? And I always held faith at the center of my relationships. So, I've only had one, which is the one I'm in right now. But if I were, when I was going into, thinking about if I was to date somebody, it would have to be like, okay, does this person have faith or not? Is this someone I could take to church? Is this someone that I could take to my family? And I felt like would be able to fit in and not feel, I guess, left out or feel like there's a pressure on her to be someone she's not, and I wanted that person to just be comfortable in who she was, especially around my family and in the church. If she felt like if that wasn't who the person she wanted to be, then I wasn't the right person for me. So that's how I looked at it. And then with Ella, I think I always found myself just trying to point her and myself into the right direction, which is trying to grow in our faith. And I brought that out the most out of anything. And although she's baptized Catholic, she didn't have any other sacraments, so more of like a revert. I always told her, I want you to do this for you. If you're just doing it for me, then don't do it, because then we're not in the right place, and it's just not going to benefit you in any way. And she always made sure she had developed that relationship with God first, so it made things a lot easier for me. And once you establish that piece, it makes everything a lot easier because you have that one common goal, and it's not just about feelings anymore. And that's how I always looked at. I always looked at dating with faith first and marriage first. Truly.
What about you, Keoni?
I think it's just how we were raised. If you're talking to someone, it should be a consistent discernment. Is this someone that I can see myself marrying? So I've only had 3 relationships. And for me, it was still like, can I see myself marrying this person? But I think as each relationship, as I went from one relationship to the next, we say God is always at the center of a relationship, but I think I began to figure out more and more as each relationship kind of went on, what that actually entails and the struggle and the hardship and the work that takes. So, my first relationship, I was a freshman in high school, person was older than me by 2 years, both Catholic, but weird. I was just like, I don't really know what's going on, So the faith was, I went to mass, but dude, how much did we talk about it, And that, obviously that relationship didn't end, and it didn't really last really long. My second one, it was a little bit more. We had a little more discussions, but the constant being on the same page, pushing each other wasn't there. And it wasn't until this current relationship with my fiance, shout out Michelle, where we really just had these conversations frequently. And as each year, so we've been dating for 3 years now, and as each year has progressed, it's been just more and more of diving in. Are we really about it? Okay, are we going to get married in the church? What does that mean? And so it's really like, okay, what does, placing God at the center like we talk about, what does that mean? And am I living it out? Am I helping her get to heaven, and is she doing the same for me? And so that was how dating was early on, and then it's progressed over time. I think the more I've learned about myself, the more I've fell in love with my own faith, and you become, you start to take responsibility for the people around you, especially the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. And when you take that responsibility, things change, and you start to have those discussions. You start to push each other. And I think that's where you get the most fruitful dialogue and growth in a relationship.
Yeah, I think one of the points that you both kind of bringing up is this idea of dating with discernment. Now, it doesn't mean you can't date unless that person is the person you're going to marry. So a lot of people get that twisted, especially people who are trying to balance between really being orthodox and faithful to meaning unless if this is the first person I'm going to date, it's the first person I'm going to marry that person, right? You can date in a way that still upholds the dignity of that other person. So whether it's 5 people or 10 people, you just have to realize that if, or one person for that matter, that person is still a child of God and has dignity that you need to uphold. And especially for us as men, because the culture today is super toxic as it relates to just objectification, especially of women. Mm-hmm. But I was going to bring up that point of both of you, as part of our upbringing, right? Just trying to raise good young men to be good Catholic men, holy men, godly men. It's been about realizing that person, if it's not your wife, it may be somebody else's, right? And also that if for the people out there listening, I say this to a lot of the youth and young adults, and I tend to get different types of looks, but I say, if they're not good enough to marry, they're not good enough to date, meaning the special projects. And so that's difficult. I think it's easier for guys out there, definitely a lot easier for guys, because there's a lot of great women out there that are trying to live a life according to God, and less on the male side, and that's something hopefully we can fix. Definitely we are trying to do that in our own ministry, in our own walk, but I think it becomes difficult for women to find what they have. So it's easier when the man leads because data tells us that. There's that Swedish study, I think, done in the 90s where the faith of the father truly affects in great numbers to great percentages the faith of the children in as they get into adulthood. But it really comes down to realizing that if that person's not a special project, you can't change anybody, right? And I think, and that's a delicate balance, right? So in both the situations with both Michelle and with Ella, reintroducing them to the faith that they were born with, right? How was that? Because if I was to give counsel, Mom and I both do marriage preparation, and we counsel a lot of couples. I mean, you're going to be dealing with that on a real level as far as being a marriage family therapist. You would say, no, unequally yoked marriages aren't going to work, right? That's a sacrifice. To be honest, that's the struggle we had even in our own home, right? Is if one person is about the faith and the other person isn't, that's going to be a difficult battle. And if you have children, it gets even worse. So what's your thoughts on that perspective? Because it's one thing to say, well, I want you to do it because of you. But at the same time, you're also discerning something where you become one flesh, right? And this idea of unequally yoked. So, Meeks, what do you think about that?
In like my approach with it, or
just your thoughts, right? Because I think if, even if you take in your situation, it was you're blessed because Ella came to the realization of God and she embraced the faith that she was born into at a young age. But, there's a lot of cases where people are out there who are dating, hoping that person will change, and they don't change. So what's that balance, right? In both your guys' situations, it works out for the better.
Yeah.
In other cases, there's people out there, a lot of people out there that say, well, he's a nice guy. He's a Christian guy. And not to say, again, even with our separated brothers and sisters, there could be really good people. But when it comes to the one thing that's at the core, even if they're a solid Christian, we're separated by different theology. One can participate in the sacraments, the other can't. And then they miss that point of all of a sudden when you have little ones, God willing, that they say, hey, how come daddy's not going to Mass? Mm-hmm. Or maybe daddy's going to Mass. Hey, how come daddy doesn't receive communion? Mommy's always receiving communion, but daddy doesn't receive communion. Why not? And now all of a sudden you're like, you have a decision with your kids, and this is for people to really listen to. Now your kids look up, and then you have a choice to make. Mommy, daddy, and God. well, what kind of a God wouldn't allow my daddy or my mommy to not receive communion? And so now you're pinned between trying to, you know what I mean? The kid's in a predicament. So that's what I mean. It's not necessarily in your situation, but people have that situation.
Yeah.
Part of what we're trying to do is help people.
I think what's important to first establish is that it's not necessarily like I thought, okay, I can change Ella. I got this. I can do this. But it was my initial saying, hey, this is what's really important to me. And if this relationship's going to be anything, then I would like for you to at least like hear me out and see what you think about it. And it wasn't necessarily like she was just, kind of vibing with it and we kind of just rolled with it. It was like, before we do anything else, I need you to be committed to this part. And you're not going to be where I'm at next week. I'm not even close to where I'm supposed to be at now. But I needed her to understand this was a journey that we both needed to take. And I had to see movement towards that. So, it took a while. We were taking her to mass for probably a few months, every single Sunday. And then she had told me, I want to get my sacraments. So then that's a necessary step I needed. It wasn't, I was taking her mass. 2 years later, we're still just going to mass. She's not saying anything. I'm not really sure where it's going, but I can change it. I can still do it. She took those steps in order for me to say, okay, then we can still do this. So I think it's important to first have that.
Actions speak louder than words.
It's important to have the actions. I think if you don't have those actions, that's when you got to draw a line and say, I can't do it then. Because it wasn't me being Superman. It was her yes that allowed me to be able to do this.
Yeah, I think that's where people get the, what do we call it? The Jesus complex, right? I'm going to save somebody. You ain't going to save anybody that doesn't want to save themselves. So, that's a great point. And this is probably more a message for the gals out there than it is for the guys because, I'll say often that guys are willing to tell you what you want to hear, but they're not often willing to do what you need them to do. Girls, I think, are a little bit different. I just think the guys are we got problems, y'all. And that's just real talk. Part of the issue in our world today is because we've abdicated our responsibilities as men. And so I think, Meeks, that's a great point that, it wasn't just, it was being patient, but at the same time expecting there to be progress, because if not, then we're going to have something to talk about. Right. Yeah. Keoni, what you think?
It was very similar. When Michelle and I first met, kind of like what Meeks was saying, I had, things that were very important to me, things that are very important to what a relationship would mean to me. And, as a Catholic man, that's important for me to at least voice, not to demand, not to throw in your face, but to voice. And so Michelle and I had that conversation, like, this is important to me. Will you go to confession with me? Will you go to Army, which is praise and worship? Will you go with me? And that was my first goal, was if she's open to it, to get her in the sacrament of confession. Like Meeks was saying last episode, we go every week. And, that was something that's been a staple of our prayer life and our faith with God. So wanting to expose her to that in a new way, a refreshing way. Michelle will tell you that she was terrified. I would be too if it's my first one since I received the sacrament, But she said yes. I didn't force her. And I think there's a fine line between pushing and forcing. And, pushing is being the man that you're called to be. If you're going to date this person and want to marry them, you are responsible for their soul. That's what you're buying into. You're saying, okay, Lord, we're going to become one flesh. And at the end of the day, when we go to heaven and face God, he's going to say, what did you do to get her to heaven? And I took that as a responsibility to, push her, guide her, but don't force her. And I think there's a fine line. I haven't been perfect at it. And that's something that it just takes constant dialogue. And I think Miko made a great point. You start little. Can you commit to this? I didn't tell her when we first met, I need you to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with me, rosary every day. We're going to go to the chapel together. No, I said, hey, can you try to go into mass with me? And then we'll watch a video here and there. We'll listen to Father Mike Schmitz together, a homily. And we'll read this book together, or whatever it may be. And it's starting with one little thing. And it's being patient. It's a lot like how God works with us in our lives, in our faith, constantly. He just plants a little seed and waits for our yes. And then he goes further and he transforms us. And that's our role as a men in our relationships. And when we're seeking someone we're supposed to marry, God's giving us the priestly duty in our marriage, in our families. And I think it was just a constant discernment of, just plant the seed, be a leader, but plant the seed, and then let her say yes. And when she has that yes, then you can move forward.
So, what do we have to say to the ladies out there that will say, all right, that's nice, Miko, Keoni, and John, but man, it's hard to find good guys out there. What do we tell them outside of, yeah, you're right?
We're trying to change some of that. I've had numerous talks with, my own friends and just seeing people on social media, and it's just wanting a good, decent, solid man. And it's a struggle because so many men, and it's the result of the generations of lack of fatherhood, where they're just caught up in the world and they have no beliefs. And kind of like we talked about in the beginning, it's just women are just another thing to get me in my state of pleasure. And there's women who are obviously most of the time a lot more mature than men, and they're wanting something real. And men aren't ready for that. And so there's a lot of gals in my own circle, and just, we've talked about it, people in conferences or whatever that may be, where they want something deeper and it's not there. And I think men need to step up, because there are women out there who deserve a man that's going to lead them to heaven. And I would say to the gals out there is, God has a plan for you. Regardless of what happens, whatever the world, brings you or has brought you, or whatever doubts you may be having, God has a plan. And it's about staying faithful to that. And another thing I would encourage too for, men and women trying to, because I know there's men out there who are saying, I need to find a girl I can, really rock with, someone I can grow in my faith with. What's your community like? Are you spending time at all trying to go out of your way? Are you in a Bible study group? Are you in a youth group? Are you going to conferences? Are you active in the church? If you're trying to find something deeper, go to those places where they find things deeper. You're not going to find it in the bar. You're not going to find it at some dinner party. You're not going to find it at the club, because people aren't there for that reason. And so I think the first step is trusting God. He has a plan for you. If you believe in God and who he is, he has someone set specifically for you. And then second, who are you surrounding yourself with? What communities are you trying to embrace and open yourself up to?
Mm-hmm. Great points.
Yeah, my advice is similar to that. I mean, if there's anything to add besides, most men are garbo, is that I think, it is pretty common. I've seen it in my time that a lot of girls, they kind of like the bad boy when, the wholesome best friends to the side over there, and he's just, it's just not glorified. I mean, guys do the same thing, right? We all want the thing that excites us, and that's just not exciting for us as someone who actually cares about you. Those kind of things, like, those aren't exciting for whatever reason. I'm not exactly sure, but I think I see that happen a lot with girls. Is there are decent guys out there, but that's just not for them. They want the one that's more exciting. They want the dangerous guy, leather jacket, whatever. You see it on the shows all the time, and they show it because it's true. So,
well, that's funny you bring that up, because I was gonna say, not to be fair to the guys out there, that they're what about those guys that go, yeah, John, you keep talking about it, but nice guys finish last, right? I see all these not so nice guys. I can use different words, but we are trying to keep this wholesome out there, having their way with whatever, and I'm over here trying to live a faithful life, trying to be respectful to women, and I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting any bites. I'm not getting any looks, anything like that. And I think the same message that Keoni had for the women is for the guys out there too, is that God has a plan. You stay faithful to God. Everything else will work out, right? Seek first the kingdom of God, Scripture tells us, and everything else will be handed unto you thereafter. And I think that's the part we have to be able to, we're not going to say it's easy at all. Whether it be friendships and or dating, discernment, and marriage, none of it's easy. Even when you get into marriage, which that's the state I'm in, it doesn't mean I stop dating my wife. I'm still dating her mom, right? That I continue to grow, and that we're still learning about each other. We're still figuring each other out. Of course, we're better at it. We're better equipped. God is at the center. We have the grace of the sacraments. There's a lot of that because we're equally yoked. And I'm trying to lead her as best as possible, but it's not always perfect. But I think for for the men and the women out there, the young men and the young women out there, is to not lose hope in Christ, realize that it's a journey and it's a marathon, not necessarily a sprint. And so don't rush one way or the other, right? Don't think that because you spent, you started off your first date in the chapel and you went to mass, that all of a sudden this guy or gal is like the best thing in the world and their marriage material, because that could be a front. They're wounded, broken people just like we are all. And don't think that, because there's nobody around you that you can see worthy of marriage, that all of a sudden that speaks to everybody in the world, and that God doesn't have you covered, because he knows what you need, not necessarily what you think you want. So, as we talk about the areas of discernment, what do you, what I wanted to kind of use the last piece of this is to talk about your approach. You're both discerning the married vocation. Obviously, Keoni is in the first step of betrothal, right? Meeks, I think you're discerning marriage, obviously. What makes you think, because there are different vocations, right? Mm-hmm. What was your discernment in that call? Was there any other discernment? Were you ever discerning, was there priestly discernment? Was there, and I don't even know if I'm going to get married. Was there single? Or was it always like, no, marriage is where I was at? Was there, just to kind of help people out there, because sometimes most people I know I run into is 90% of them think I'm called to marriage, which may be true. But what was your discernment like, if any?
I think growing up, I looked up to you a lot. And so the idea of what you and mom had, that was cool. Like, we wanted that. High school sweethearts, fell in love at a young age, had each other's back through it all, everything that you guys been through and that you guys persevered, and then, raise us and we get to see the fruition of that. That was cool. It was like a movie, like a superhero movie. And we're like, I want that, So I think marriage is always something that we, at least for me, I'll let Meek speak after, but something that I wanted, seeing that. And I think, my confirmation statement was St. Joseph, because I wanted to be a father just like you. Mm-hmm. And so as far as, discerning my vocation, that was kind of at the forefront. It was always there. I remember going to conferences, though, they talk about the priesthood, and it would kind of go into my head, but it was never like a tug. Mm. I just felt it was like, I wonder what that would be like. But I never felt like a call. There was priests that I admire, and I'd be like, wow, that is pretty cool what they do. But it was more of a cordial appreciation. Like, you know what, I respect their office, and that is a really cool priest. But that isn't for me. And so I think when it came down to it is the idea of falling in love with someone and having like your battle partner that we talk about in scripture. Like, this is your battle partner to get to heaven with and to fight against the toxicity of the culture. And that was something that was exciting, something I yearned for. So that was my call. And obviously it's still in discernment, but 10-10-20-20, it's it's wrapped up.
It's not done until it's done, but
Yeah.
10-10-20. Yep, we're there. What about you, Meeks?
I don't know if it's ever necessarily discernment. I was always thought I was gonna get married. There's no question.
So you were just kind of convinced that was a call for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see any other call. I knew there's other calls, but I was like, that's not my call.
What else we want to talk about when it comes to relationships? Because there's so much there. I would say just being, somebody who's married, Mom and I will be celebrating 25 years of marriage this year, right? This is our a jubilee year for us. And I think one of the messages that I know Mom would agree on, and we talk about it a lot when it comes to relationships, especially when it comes to marriage, is that, a lot of times, and you'll get this as a counselor, right? People say, well, what do you think the number one thing people get divorced is? Most people will say finances and communication, right? And while those may be up there in that top 5, Mom and I firmly believe it's a lack of sacrifice, right? That people don't understand that marriage to truly be lived out the way God intended is the total gift of self. So we hear that in, Pope St. John Paul II in Theology of the Body. He speaks about man in the dimension of gift, so that man never truly finds himself until he gives himself away. Right. And I think that's the, as we kind of wrap up this conversation on relationships, Jesus tells us in the gospel, no greater love than this, than for a man to lay down his life for a friend, for a brother, for a wife, for his child. We think about, your sister, right? We just welcome in to the world. Shout out Bree and Jamie and baby Izzy, baby Isabel, who is 3 weeks old today. Praise God for her. They're learning firsthand that, for one, that the love that was invisible between Jamie and Bria has now become visible, is now their responsibility and the sacrifice. They're learning really the hard way, the real way, that life's no longer about them, right? Bria's got to sleep, Jamie's got to sleep whenever Izzy's sleeping, and you got somebody depending on you. So that idea of sacrifice in any relationship, what's the true measure of love? Sacrifice, right? Sacrifice. Any thoughts on that? Any parting words on relationships?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that more like a self call out, I guess, because as I have been really, seriously thinking about proposing to my girlfriend, I've just been really understanding how much that's got to take out of me, and it's not just, here's a ring to show a promise. Here's a ring to say that I'll love you forever, and that kind of way that I think a lot of the culture does. But as I've really thought about it, I've just come to realization how much more of a man I got to come, and how much more I have to die to myself, I guess. And because you said it, that we're supposed to love the way Jesus loved, and Jesus wasn't just hugging people; he had to die for everybody. And so that's something that I took a lot serious, because I was not good at that in high school. I had the whole make sure we got to go to our church stuff, but I wasn't dying to myself. I was just 16. I started dating at 15 years old. I was doing the best I could as a theologian and all that kind of stuff, but I was 15, so I didn't understand that part. So now that I am truly discerning, engagement and marriage, I'm gee, now I'm 19, so I'm still not even close to anything of a theologian, but I still understand now how much more I got to die to myself, and how much more I got to be the first one to sacrifice, not Ella, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that's something I want to be able to share, to just be a little bit more transparent with people, because it's not like I've been so far from a perfect boyfriend. As you guys know, I'm the most impatient person on the earth, and I get irritated over everything.
Real talk.
And I can be extremely lazy with stuff, but that's probably the biggest thing I would probably leave it with. Whoever wants to take that and it resonates with you, but I'd say if you're gonna take anything from relationships, especially is that sacrifice and dying to yourself. That's what love is. Love's a choice every day. It's not a feeling. And that's something that I'm trying to work on, especially to, before I get on one knee, just get that part. Obviously never gonna be perfect at it, but start taking that a lot more seriously.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is to remember that we're works in progress, but we should be getting better. You said this on the episode on True Faith Real Talk, that our goal should be to get better every day. And I think, because some people would say, man, you guys are too young to get married. And I think, whatever, that's just, that what the culture is beat into.
Too young for you, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that are older in age, but super immature, right? Emotionally, mentally, and definitely spiritually. But I just think there's a level where in marriage, it's going to highlight marriage for us as Catholics is a sacrament. And that means that is it's a sacrament of service, the church will teach us. So holy orders, becoming an ordained minister of the church, a priest or a deacon, that's a sacrament of service. And then holy matrimony is a sacrament of service. And in that means that, like your mom and I, by everything I do to sanctify her and vice versa, also sanctifies ourselves. So everything I do to lead her to heaven also leads me to heaven, and vice versa. So the purification, the sacrifice, the blood, sweat, and tears that gets poured into that is one thing that will lead both of us to heaven. The other part of that is that she's going to highlight to me all my deficiencies, my impatience, right? So Ella, Michelle's going to highlight, y'all know it, right? You obviously come from the same tree, right? So it's like, we got issues with pride. We got issues with patience. We got issues with, we're moody. You just name it. We got a whole list of stuff, y'all, but we're sinners. So our wives, our children, if God blesses you with children, are going to highlight that for us. So don't think that just because you fall, you're not cut out for it. It means that, saints are sinners who get back up, and take another step forward, give it to God, seek the grace of the sacraments, realize that you need to deny oneself. If you want to really meditate on this, especially for those of you out there who are dating or discerning, always talk about reading Ephesians 5:21 through 32, and to really understand St. Paul's formula when it comes to the married life. Keoni, you got any parting words on relationships, friendships, dating, or otherwise?
Yeah, kind of going off what you said and what Meeks was saying, talking about sacrifice and the importance of it. And what sacrifice is doing is, you're growing on the vices that you have. You're starting to eliminate those, and you're starting to foster virtue. And so the sacrifice is you're dying to yourself in the little things, and it's intentional. And so I encourage all of the couples out there, and those obviously that are married, what are you doing to die to yourself, and is it intentional? So today I'm going to give up that extra cup of coffee for my wife or for my girlfriend or for my pride. I'm laying down my pride, and it's intentional. I think those intentional acts of self-mortification are where you truly become able to give yourself as a gift without anything holding you back. So that would be my sort of my parting words to any couples out there. But I think for those that aren't there, those are kind of single, kind of doing their thing, maybe wanting something deeper. We talk about the Jesus complex, wanting to convert whoever you're talking to. I think that the only way you can really start to convince someone is when they see you live it. And so we see these couples where, I want to get into it, but my boyfriend won't buy it, or my girlfriend won't buy it. And it's like, are you living it? What is it? Just something you talk about? They're not going to buy it, because what that means to them is that they're going to have to make a choice in their life to say no to something that they've known all their life for something that you're presenting on the table, and you're not even buying it. Mm-hmm. And so here they have to face this choice. You're telling me to give up everything I know for something that I've never even seen in your life, you haven't even talked about. So for those, either women or men that are trying to have a good relationship with someone who may be open, may not be, are you living it? Are you catechizing? Are you being able to show yourself as a light? And I think that is where you can actually have that conversation like what Miko and I have. We're passionate about this, and we're going to bring it to the table as an option, and we can see where that goes. But if they don't even see it as a passion, why would they buy into it? Because what you're saying is, I want you to change your whole life for something that I don't even buy. And we can't say that to ourselves, expect them if we don't expect it for ourselves. So I think for those of you that are maybe wanting something deeper, wanting your significant other, or wanting the person you're dating or talking to kind of jump on board, go deeper into your own faith,
Yeah, live it, right? Live it, witness to it. Well, fellas, it's been a good time. We've had a good time talking about relationships, discernment, dating, friendships. This is the first episode of Priest, Prophet, and King. This is a podcast created to change the culture from within, starting with ourselves first and embracing our own office of Priest, Prophet, and King in our own homes and our own lives. And for Keoni and Miko, I just want to thank you all for listening to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to us. And find us all different ways: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. And until we meet again, we just always say, get holy or die trying. PPK all day.